If you thought Marvel Cosmic Invasion was just another cosmic adventure with heroes punching aliens and saving the universe, I'm going to ask for a few minutes of your attention because there's stuff here that changes everything. Today, I've selected 10 theories that, if correct, completely change the way we see who the true villain is, what the board of this war is, and what is really at stake. I'm Mary, and let's get to the video. In the standard ending, everyone already knows what happens. The heroes hold back the Annihilation wave at the edge of the impossible. Earth breathes again, and Uatu appears as that narrator who's half judge, half chronicler of the universe, saying that victory came at a cost, but hope always returns when someone decides to stand tall. It's a closure that provides catharsis, regroups the team, and leaves the feeling of, okay, the cosmos is scary, but we still belong to it. It works because even with destruction, the full stop is one of human reconstruction. Now, if Annihilus had won, then everything changes, because the Annihilation wave isn't just another invasion. It's an idea of a universe where life becomes a resource. I like this theory because it takes the game's tone and pushes it into true cosmic horror. Earth wouldn't be destroyed all at once, it would be converted. Cities would turn into organic colonies. The sky would have that constant drone of swarms, and the few remaining heroes wouldn't be liberating the planet. They'd be hiding people in pockets of resistance, as if it were a space post-apocalypse. And the part about Nova turning traitor is the knife twist that makes this more personal and tragic. Because you can imagine him not as a caricature villain, but as someone who saw the scale of the disaster and concluded that the only way to save anything was to negotiate with the inevitable, like capitulating to preserve a spark. Except in this universe, his betrayal wouldn't be a quick plot twist, it would be a symbol. When even the guy who represents cosmic order chooses submission, the message becomes, the resistance has no backing from the heavens, and that breaks the morale of any survival cell. And then comes the cruelest detail, Galactus eating the scraps. For me, this would be the perfect final irony. Annihilus wins, but his victory rots in the universe's own mouth. After Earth is enslaved and drained, Galactus arrives as an indifferent cataclysm, not to end the war, but to feed on what's left, as if all that suffering had just been meal prep. And imagine Uatu narrating this, not as a celebration, but as an elegy, saying that there are timelines where no one goes home and the cosmos moves on, hungry, as if nothing mattered. When someone raises the idea that Phyla-Vell might be a spy for Annihilus the whole time, I immediately think that would be a delicious twist, but also risky. Because Phyla, by carrying Mar-Vell's legacy and having a connection to the Kree side, already enters the story with natural political weight. And from there, it's easy to confuse complicated loyalty with treason. Still, I like this theory because it puts the character in a place of constant tension. She wouldn't just be another heroine in the invasion, but someone hand-picking information the entire time. The point that fuels my suspicion the most is precisely the detail of the skins and references to her martyr phase. When a game makes a point of remembering a period when the character was darker and linked to oblivion, I can't see that as just innocent fan service. It feels almost like an invitation for us to be suspicious. And even if the game's story doesn't copy the oblivion-controlling everything dynamic, reminding us of that phase creates a vibe. What if she's following a greater purpose the team doesn't even imagine? This type of echo from the comics is usually used as an emotional clue, even when the plot is original. Now, the part about the too deep knowledge in Fort Galactus is the perfect seasoning to make the theory catch fire. Lines of dialogue about the negative zone and her father's time there can sound like something she shouldn't master with such intimacy, especially in the middle of a war against an enemy coming from that exact type of cosmic context. At the same time, you can interpret it in a more grounded way. She might have studied this as an obsession, as inherited trauma, as someone who grew up surrounded by Kree stories and reports about what happened to Mar-Vell. But the feeling while playing is just that. Okay, you know too much and you are too calm. If I had to bet, I'd say the theory works better if we think of her as Phyla with her own agenda, rather than a Phyla literally sold out to Annihilus. She might be acting as a Kree chess piece, trying to secure a strategic advantage in the chaos of the invasion, or withholding information to use at the right moment. And that would already create enough conflict to explode later on. And here's the cool part. Even if she turns out to be totally good in the end, the game might be playing with this paranoia on purpose, because cosmic characters become much more interesting when we're never 100% sure of what they really want. This theory of Galactus as the true villain is one of those that completely changes how we view the entire game, and I admit it makes frightening sense. Because think with me, Annihilus is powerful, he is destructive, but he operates with direct, chaotic, almost savage violence. Galactus? He is pure efficiency. He doesn't need to wear himself out fighting entire military fleets or facing the organized resistance of empires. He just needs to wait for someone to do that for him. And if the Annihilation wave is literally clearing the path, destroying all military infrastructure that could stop him, then Annihilus isn't the final antagonist. He is the perfect tool, the cosmic battering ram that breaks down the doors before the true predator enters. The detail of Galactus icons appearing on resistance terminals in Act 3 is the type of Easter egg you can't ignore, because that isn't a design accident, it's subliminal narrative. If he is following the trail of destruction left by Annihilus, then the game is showing you without shouting, Galactus is not an ally, he is not neutral, he is orchestrating this. He knows exactly what he's doing, and every world devastated by the wave becomes a prepared banquet, defenseless, without resistance, practically packaged for consumption. It's genius from a strategic point of view and terrifying from a narrative point of view because it transforms the entire campaign into a prelude. And here comes the part that convinces me the most. Him not being a playable boss at launch. This isn't a technical limitation, it's clearly a narrative decision. Galactus is too big, literally and metaphorically, to be wasted as a common endgame boss. If the data mines really show that he is being saved for the expansion, then the game is building him up as the inevitable threat, the one that comes after you think you've won. You defeat Annihilus, breathe a sigh of relief, and then realize the universe is in pieces, vulnerable, and Galactus has barely started. This is storytelling in layers, and I love when games do this. Honestly, if this theory is confirmed, Marvel Cosmic Invasion will enter that category of games that make you rethink everything after you finish. Because every mission, every destroyed planet, every victory against the wave ceases to be progress and becomes tragic irony. You were helping the true villain the whole time, you just didn't know it. And this fits perfectly with the Galactus of the comics. He isn't evil in the conventional sense. He is a force of nature, inevitable, patient. He doesn't need to fight. He just needs to wait for chaos to do his work. And we, the players, were the perfect pawns on this cosmic board. This theory of Venom joining the Annihilation wave is brilliant because it doesn't just stay in, it would be cool to see this, it messes directly with gameplay mechanics that already exist but are underutilized. And that bothers me in a good way, you know? Because when you play Act 3 of Marvel Cosmic Invasion, fire and sound are almost decorative elements. You use them because they're there, but you rarely need to use them. Now imagine if suddenly those same elements became mandatory because the bugs of the wave gained a symbiotic coating that nullifies physical damage. The whole game would change face. Builds focused on standard projectiles would become dead weight, and you'd be forced to rethink strategy, team composition, everything. This is intelligent design disguised as a fan theory. And narratively, it makes sense in an almost scary way. Venom, or any symbiote, isn't just a powerful creature. It is an evolutionary parasite, something that adapts, that improves the host while it spreads. If it merged with the Annihilation wave, you wouldn't just have a horde of destructive insects, you'd have an enhanced plague, something that corrects its own weaknesses as it advances. And Annihilus is already obsessed with survival and power, so the idea of him using the symbiote as a biological tool to make his army indestructible, that's exactly the kind of thing he would do without hesitation. It would be like taking two cosmic forces of destruction and multiplying the nightmare. Now, the part that gets me the most is the impact on the boss fight, because you mentioned something crucial. In the current game, Annihilus has a clear window of vulnerability when he's on the ground. That's when you go all out, when you capitalize. But if he had a symbiotic coating, that window disappears. He becomes dangerous all the time, at any distance, because the symbiote doesn't let him have a physical weak point. You would be forced to play perfectly, using only specific elemental abilities, and any mistake would be fatal. This would transform a fight that is already difficult into a brutally technical experience. And I know part of the community would love that, while another part would tear their hair out. Honestly, if the developers actually implemented this variant, whether as DLC, hard mode, or a temporary event, it would be a game changer. Because it's not just another strong enemy, it's a systemic change that punishes anyone who played the game on autopilot. And from a lore perspective, it would open doors. The symbiote could have come from Earth during the invasion, or be a Kree weapon that leaked, or even be something Annihilus himself discovered exploring other dimensions. The narrative possibilities are infinite, and the mechanic is already there waiting to be explored. This is one of those theories you hope becomes reality, because it doesn't break the game, it elevates it. This theory of the Silver Surfer as a traitor gains a completely different layer when you add the possibility of him becoming a playable boss. And on top of that, with that dark silver look and glowing eyes that calls back to the Fallen One. Because then it's no longer just an abstract moral dilemma, it's a direct consequence in gameplay. And that changes everything. If the Surfer really becomes an elite boss or an alternate ending, you would literally be fighting against someone who was an ally, someone who wields the power cosmic without limitations, and who is now convinced that handing worlds over to Galactus is the only way out. And from a balancing standpoint, it would be a delicious technical nightmare, because the Surfer isn't a common fighter. He manipulates energy, flies at impossible speeds, phases through matter. How do you make a fair boss fight against that without taking away what makes him terrifying? The detail of the model with a darker shade and glowing eyes isn't just aesthetic. It's pure visual narrative. Because in the comics, when the Surfer gets corrupted or possessed, whether by the Fallen One or darker cosmic influences, he loses that clean silver shine and gains a heavier, almost oppressive appearance. If this leaked model really exists in the game files, then the developers have planned a fallen version of him from the start. And this feeds the theory perfectly. He wouldn't just be a generic boss, he would be a tragic transformation, visually and mechanically. You would look at him and know instantly that something went wrong, that he crossed a line with no return. Now, imagine the impact of this fight as the final boss of an alternate route. You spend the whole game trusting the Surfer as a cosmic guide, as the voice of reason, and suddenly he becomes the final obstacle between you and saving the universe. The fight would be philosophically charged. You wouldn't be facing a villain who wants to destroy everything, but someone who genuinely believes they are saving the cosmos in the most efficient way possible. Every attack of his would be relentless, but calculated. Every line of dialogue would be a cold, almost mathematical justification. Galactus needs energy. I chose the worlds with the lowest chance of resisting the wave. You don't understand the full picture. And the worst part, part of you, while playing, would understand his argument, even while hating the conclusion. If this is confirmed as playable content, be it DLC or expansion, it would be one of the boldest narrative choices I've ever seen in a superhero game. Because turning the Silver Surfer, one of Marvel's most noble and tragic characters, into an antagonist for legitimate reasons and not cheap mind control is risking the wrath of fans. But it's exactly this kind of risk that creates unforgettable moments. And mechanically, a boss that uses power cosmic to manipulate the environment, create energy constructs, fly around the arena at high speed, and force you to use strategies completely different from the rest of the game, that would be brutal, frustrating, and absolutely memorable. The idea of the cosmic Ghost Rider stuck in a time loop trying to stop the invasion is one of those theories that not only adds narrative depth, but literally reinvents the game's genre. Because think about it, a traditional beat-em-up is about linear progression. You move forward, defeat bosses, finish the story. But if Frank Castle has already lived through this invasion thousands of times and failed all of them, suddenly the game gains a layer of tragedy and futility that transforms every run into a desperate attempt to break a cycle. And mechanically, this would open doors for permadeath with accumulated progression, like you lose but learn something new, unlock a different route, carry an upgrade to the next loop. It would be transforming Marvel Cosmic Invasion into a narrative roguelite, where every failure tells the story of one more failed attempt by Frank to save the cosmos. From a lore perspective, this fits perfectly with who the Cosmic Ghost Rider is. He isn't just powerful, he is temporally broken. In the comics, he's already seen apocalyptic futures, served Thanos, carried the power cosmic, and the curse of the spirit of vengeance at the same time. If he is stuck in a loop where the Annihilation wave always wins, it makes total sense that he keeps coming back, adjusting variables, trying to find the timeline where everything works out. And the psychological weight of this would be devastating. Imagine how many times he's seen allies die, how many times he's seen entire planets being devoured, knowing he'll have to relive it all again. Every cutscene of his would be loaded with exhaustion, cynicism, the vibe of someone who has already lost hope but can't stop trying. Now, the part that interests me most is how this would affect gameplay. If the Cosmic Ghost Rider is really implemented as a playable character, he would technically be the most broken of the cast. And that wouldn't be a bug, it would be a feature. Because he would have to be absurdly strong to justify why he is the only one capable of going back in time and continuing to fight. Power cosmic mixed with Ghost Rider abilities, hellfire chain attacks mixed with stellar energy explosions, infinite mobility riding the cosmic cycle, he would be OP on purpose, but balanced by the extreme difficulty of the roguelite mode where every death partially resets progress. It would be that feeling of you are powerful, but the universe is more so. If this theory materializes as a DLC or alternate mode, it would be one of the most ambitious additions a beat-em-up has ever received, because it wouldn't be just another character, it would be a complete overhaul of the game's narrative and mechanical structure. You would play the normal campaign with heroes trying to stop the invasion in real time, and then unlock the Cosmic Ghost Rider mode, where the same story becomes a cyclical temporal nightmare. And the best part? This would explain all the inconsistencies, all the convenient coincidences of the main plot, because maybe Frank has already adjusted events in previous loops to give the heroes a better chance this time. It would be meta, it would be tragic, and it would be genius. The theory of Uatu as the hidden villain is one of those that turns everything upside down because it messes with the most basic trust you have in the game, the narrator. Because from the start, we accept that the Watcher is there as a guide, as the voice of cosmic wisdom that only observes and informs. But what if every briefing, every objective he passes on is calculated not to help you, but to test how much you can handle? The idea of selective omission is scary, precisely because it's not a direct lie. He doesn't fool you by saying something false. He simply doesn't tell you what you need to know. And in the context of a game where you trust that the tutorial and objectives are preparing you for success, discovering that the guide himself is sabotaging your efficiency would be a brutal narrative betrayal. The detail of Act 2 missions directing heroes to already lost zones is the kind of thing that goes unnoticed on the first playthrough, but becomes glaring when you stop to analyze. Because if Uatu truly sees everything, if he has access to all timelines and possibilities, why on earth would he send the Resistance to spend resources on battles that are already decided? The obvious answer would be incompetence, but the Watcher isn't incompetent. He is omniscient. So the only explanation left is intentionality. He is deliberately weakening the Resistance, draining resources, forcing the heroes to fight at a disadvantage. And that transforms every lost mission into evidence of manipulation, as if he were conducting a cruel experiment where failure is part of the plan. Now, the part about the tutorial failure is where the theory gets really sinister, because every game teaches essential mechanics right at the start. That's basic design. But if Uatu deliberately omits information about elemental weaknesses of enemies in the prologue, he isn't just testing skill, he's filtering who deserves to survive. It is cosmic Darwinism disguised as an incomplete tutorial. And from a narrative point of view, this aligns perfectly with the Watcher's philosophy in the comics. He observes, but does not interfere. Except when he interferes in subtle, indirect, almost imperceptible ways. If he is orchestrating the invasion as a final test to determine who is worthy of defending the universe, then every omission, every faulty direction would be part of a brutal selection process. If this were true as a real plot twist, it would be one of the bravest narrative turns I've ever seen in an action game, because it would mean you spent the whole game trusting the voice narrating your missions, only to discover in the end that he was guiding you toward the abyss the whole time. And the genius of it is that he never lies. He just chooses when to speak and what to leave out, and that is much more disturbing than explicit villainy. Imagine a final cutscene where he admits everything, without remorse, just observing coldly and saying something like, "It was necessary. You needed to prove you are worthy of surviving what comes next." It would be that type of villain you don't defeat with punches, but with choices, and maybe not even that. Because the Watcher doesn't fight. He just watches. And if he really is the architect of everything, then even your victory might have been planned by him from the start. This level of meta-narrative would be disturbing and brilliant at the same time.
The theory that some heroes are alternative versions and not the originals from Earth 616 is one of those that completely changes how you interpret every cutscene, every dialogue, every strange animation. Because when you play the first time, you accept everything as creative freedom or gameplay choices. But when you start putting the pieces together, movesets that are off-pattern, dialogues that don't make sense, strange visual details, suddenly you realize there might be something much bigger going on. And the idea that the game puts you in control of multiversal variants without ever explaining it directly, that would be meta-narrative of the highest level, because it would mean that not even you, the player, are fully aware of who you are really controlling until you start to get suspicious. The case of Captain America is the most glaring to me, because the Steve Rogers we know is tactical, defensive, the guy who uses the shield to protect as much as to attack. But if in this game he has an ultra-aggressive moveset with a special that literally ignores his own safety, that's not just a gameplay difference, that's a character difference. The theory that he comes from a reality where he never stopped fighting in World War II makes too much sense. It would be a Cap who never had the chance to evolve beyond the soldier, who never became a symbol of hope, only of brutal survival. And that would explain perfectly why he acts like a war machine instead of an inspiring leader. It's subtle, but once you notice, you can't ignore it. Now, the detail of Thor with reddish particles instead of blue/white is the type of visual Easter egg that cannot be an accident, because visual effect color is a deliberate design choice, and red in Thor's electricity immediately calls back to corrupted or alternative power sources, chaos magic, diverted power cosmic, or even energy extracted from something forbidden. And if his Mjolnir is actually an energy construct instead of the original hammer, then this isn't the Thor we know. It's a version that lost everything in Ragnarok and is holding himself together with cosmic duct tape, using what's left to keep fighting. This adds a layer of desperation and tragedy that the game never verbalizes, but that is there, hidden in the animations. And then comes the bombshell. Tony Stark asking who is the guy on the board when he sees the Silver Surfer. This isn't a script error. It's impossible for it to be a casual mistake. The original Tony has dealt with cosmic threats dozens of times, has worked with the Fantastic Four, has faced Galactus. If he doesn't recognize the Surfer, then either he comes from a timeline where cosmic events never happened, or, and this is the part that gives me chills, he isn't human. The suggestion that some heroes are LDMs or life model decoys or variants from dystopian futures would perfectly explain those cold, robotic voice lines in rescue missions. Imagine discovering in the end that half the playable cast are replicas, substitutes, broken versions of heroes who already died in other timelines, all gathered by someone, Uatu, Galactus, for this last desperate attempt to stop the invasion. It would be narratively devastating, but it would explain everything. The inconsistencies, the strange dialogues, the off-pattern behaviors.
So this theory that the invasion is actually an attempt to save the universe is one of those that turns the whole game inside out, because it transforms villains into tragic anti-heroes and heroes into people who are actively preventing cosmic salvation without knowing it. And the scariest part is that the gameplay mechanics support this reading in a way you can't ignore. Because when you see wave enemies collecting organic biomass and processing it into specific pods, the first reaction is, okay, they're making resources for the war. But what if it isn't that? What if each pod is literally a backup of life, a cosmic Noah's Ark being filled while reality crumbles? This changes everything. Suddenly, every soldier you defeat isn't an invader being stopped, it's someone trying to save what can still be saved before total collapse. The idea of a controlled burn is perfect because it captures exactly the gigantic moral dilemma this theory creates. A nihilist wouldn't be a monster without a motive, he would be someone doing the brutal math. If the positive universe is an accelerated entropy and is going to collapse anyway, the only way out is to extract all life now before it's too late and store it in the negative zone until reality stabilizes. Is it horrible? Yes. Does it cause unimaginable suffering? Also yes. But if the alternative is total extinction with no chance of return, then Annihilus would be playing the role no one has the courage to play. And that would explain perfectly why he acts with such urgency, with such violence. It's not sadism, it's operational desperation. Every second lost is more life that can't be saved. The detail of the entropy stabilization being an exclusive drop from the wave generals is the most concrete evidence of this theory, because you're absolutely right. Why the hell would invaders who only want to destroy carry entropy stabilization devices? That makes no sense if their goal is pure annihilation. But it makes total sense if their presence on the planets is serving as a temporary anchor, holding physical reality together while the biomass extraction process happens. It's as if each general were a mobile stabilization point, preventing the area from collapsing before the evacuation finishes. And the fact that you, the player, are killing these anchors and accelerating the destabilization without knowing it, that is tragic irony of the best kind. If this theory were true, the narrative would be one of the most devastating plot twists I've
ever seen in an action game, because it would mean the heroes spent the whole game fighting for the wrong side, preventing the only real attempt to save something of the universe. And the worst part? They never had a way of knowing. No one explained. Uatu didn't, which conveniently feeds the theory of him being a hidden villain. Reed Richards maybe found out too late. And in the end, when reality truly starts to collapse and there is no more biomass to save, the heroes will have to face the possibility that they won the war but lost everything anyway. It would be cruel, it would be philosophical, and it would be narratively brave in a way few games have the courage to be. I love this Nexus architecture theory because it transforms Marvel Cosmic Invasion from a straightforward beat-em-up into a kind of showcase of colliding realities, and that gives a much more unsettling flavor to every stage. When I see a game using references from different eras of Marvel, my initial instinct is to think, okay, fan service. But the way you described it, it seems too intentional to be just homage. It's like the game is telling you, don't trust what you're seeing, because the scenery doesn't belong to a single timeline. This purposeful aesthetic inconsistency, the so-called temporal bleeding, is the kind of thing that, for me, only works if the game really embraces the idea of overlapping realities. Seeing an MCU-style Avengers tower in the middle of heroes with 90s uniforms doesn't seem like laziness, it looks like a visual message, as if the engine itself were rendering layers of different universes in the same space. And when this appears in ruins and destroyed backgrounds, the feeling gets even stronger. It's not just destruction, it's reality tearing and letting other designs leak through. The part about audio, metadata, and voice acting is what would make me believe this the most, because voice acting is expensive, and usually smaller games try to standardize. If Noir Spider-Man not only changes his tone and speaks like he's from 1929, but also makes NPCs react to confusion with his vocabulary, then it's no longer cosmetic. It's game logic recognizing you are from somewhere else. I would only be a bit cautious because we, from the outside, can't always confirm data mines or folder structures and dev intentions. But as a concept, it is a very strong clue. The system is treating skin as a timeline variant, not as an outfit. And the reality glitches between Acts 2 and 3 would be the icing on the cake, because it's exactly the kind of thing many people would call a bug, when in fact it is narrative language. If those frames show alternative versions of the scenery, like the Baxter building intact, flickering for an instant, that sounds like post-processing and designed to simulate crossing layers while you go deeper into the negative zone. I personally think this idea is genius because it recontextualizes progression. You aren't just going from point A to B, you are crossing a multiversal corridor where every step pulls a fragment of another timeline on top of yours.